All right, we're going to keep these pictures up from WCBS, our sister station in New York. We want to slide away from their coverage, though, to talk with Ron Hosko, who is a CBSN law enforcement expert. He is former FBI. Glad to talk to you. Sorry it's under these circumstances. Bring us up to date on what law enforcement is concerned about. What is going on at the hospital right now in the Bronx?
Well, first, law enforcement will be trying to set up and push back a perimeter to keep potential new victims out of the area, to try to identify and contain this subject as they're assessing, is it one person, was it a personal or workplace type attack, disgruntled employee, personal grudge, or something bigger and more nefarious than that in some way. And so it's going to be a complicated matter in a big hospital where you have multiple floors and potentially hundreds of patients and employees who can't necessarily leave those patients. Who knows if surgery is going on in some of these locations in critical life-saving treatment. So this is going to be a delicate matter for police. It's going to require, I would think, a lot of resources unless the shooter has been contained, isolated, there's contact, or they've been neutralized already. It's going to be a complicated matter, possibly requiring the responders to go floor by floor, room by room.
Well, we have heard, Ron, some reports that the shooter is holed up right now, that he has barricaded himself inside of a room or a space inside the hospital, that he has a rifle with him, presumably the weapon that he used in order to cause those injuries. And we should also say, Ron, that the New York Times is now reporting that 3 doctors at this hospital have been shot. And so we're talking about multiple injuries here and a man who still has a rifle by his side. And you talk about going room to room in a facility, in a building this size. What is that like? Who does it? How do they prepare themselves for that?
Well, fortunately, the New York Police Department, Emergency Services Unit, tactical units, with potential assistance from a range of federal law enforcement, has the capability. They do know, because we've had these active shooter incidents around the country. There have been all kinds of conferences and training ongoing about active shooter response. So law enforcement is pretty practiced in this area. It's very likely that the hospital itself has had active shooter training, ideally in conjunction with the police department up there. So if people follow those essential rules, that may well save lives and prevent further harm. If the reporting that you're hearing is accurate, that the shooter has been isolated, that to me is very good news, because police can come in with body bunkers, heavy armored plates on rollers, and further isolate, keeping other potential victims safe. It can limit the amount of floor space and rooms that they might have to evacuate to just a very small area of the hospital. And of course, what they'd have to do is make sure that these rounds is something that's potentially fired from an AR-15, M16 style weapon can certainly go through walls. So they're going to have a good understanding of what his available firepower is, and make sure that the perimeters, the inside perimeters, are set far enough back that you're really worried about penetration of a bullet or bullets through multiple rooms, multiple walls. They can certainly accomplish that if they have him contained.
If you're just joining us, we have live pictures now from a helicopter that is hovering above Bronx Lebanon Hospital in the Bronx. It's only about 20 or so blocks north of Yankee Stadium. If you're familiar with that area, there has been a shooting, multiple shootings, perhaps involving one active shooter who we're told has holed himself up inside a room inside or a space inside of that hospital with a weapon. We are hearing reports of multiple people injured. The New York Times is reporting that 3 doctors have been been shot. We're talking with Ron Hosko, who is a CBSN law enforcement expert, former FBI. And one of the other reports that we have heard, Ron, is that the shooter is a former employee at the hospital. And I'm wondering, from a law enforcement perspective, how does that change the strategy? If you're dealing with a former employee, disgruntled workplace type situation, as opposed to a random shooter who might just come in off the street, I guess there must be different approaches for that reason, right?
Well, I think the overall approach is essentially the same, where you're trying to isolate, contain, try to open a discussion with the shooter. You know, very, very commonly, these events are really concluded before the first responders get inside the building, or they're resolved on first contact with law enforcement, and that is by the active shooter taking their own life. So we don't know. That could have already occurred here. It could be that if this was a former employee, it's a workplace violence trigger, and we have a person who was actively seeking an individual or multiple individuals. We don't know if it was because of a performance review, interpersonal conflict, a termination recently that has been simmering, and they came back to really take revenge on a person or a small group of people. And it could be that he, in his mind, accomplished that mission and is prepared to surrender because there's no one else he wants to do harm to. It could be that he is contemplating taking his own life, knowing that if he shot multiple people or there's been a loss of life, that he faces the rest of his life in prison. So all those dynamics are going to be at play. All of the responders, these certainly New York Police Department, will have crisis negotiators with them. And what you want to do as quickly as you can, to the extent possible, is start a dialogue, have an engagement, understand what their interests are, what their intent is, let them know that they have been contained, and then really try to work to a surrender, where if the active part of the shooting is over and he is isolated, now you potentially have a barricaded subject. We don't know. Could be a barricaded subject with hostages. So all that is yet to be made known to us. But that's the purpose of crisis negotiators, coming in and trying to start a dialogue and try to convince the person, let's not do any more harm.